This episode is based on mission logs, after-action reports, and pilot debriefings recovered from United States Army Air Force's archives. The voices you'll hear come from the men who flew Escort over occupied Europe in 1944 and 45. You never leave your wingman. 6 minutes. 2 decisions. 12 bombers made it home. This is the story of one P-51 Mustang pilot, one Escort mission, and the doctrine that changed the air war over Germany. Winter, 1944. The skies over Nazi-occupied Europe. American heavy bombers, B-17 flying fortresses, and B-24 liberators were flying deep into Germany. Their targets: oil refineries, marshalling yards, aircraft factories, the strategic bombing campaign that would break the Reich's industrial backbone. But the bombers couldn't do it alone. German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190, as attacked in waves. Without fighter escort, bomber losses were catastrophic. In some missions, over 20% of the bomber force didn't return. The solution: the North American P-51 Mustang, long range, high altitude, and deadly in a dogfight. With external drop tanks, the Mustang could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. No other Allied fighter could do that. The question this episode explores: how did one pilot's decision to stay with his wingman, instead of chasing an enemy fighter, save a bomber formation and prove the value of disciplined escort doctrine? His name was Captain Robert Hayes, age 26, from Ohio, a pilot in the 352nd Fighter Group, 8th Air Force, based at Bodney, England. Bob had flown 42 combat missions. He knew the P-51 inside and out. On January 15, 1945, Bob's log recorded this. Mission number 43. Target area: Magdeburg Marshalling Yards. Takeoff 09:15 hours. Rendezvous with bomber stream at 10,000 feet over waypoint Charlie. Escort altitude 24 to 26,000 feet. Fuel load: internal 184 gallons, 2 external 110-gallon drop tanks. Estimated time on station: 2 hours 15 minutes. The P-51D, powered by a Packard Merlin engine, 1,200 horsepower. Top speed: 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Armed with 650 caliber machine guns. It was the best escort fighter in the world, but range wasn't everything. Doctrine mattered, and on this mission, doctrine would be tested. The briefing room at Bodney, 0700 hours. 30 pilots from the 352nd sat in folding chairs, notebooks open. The operations officer stood at a map of Europe, routes marked in red and blue. Target: Magdeburg, deep into Germany, 260 miles from the English coast. The bomber stream: 60 B-17 flying fortresses from the 91st Bomb Group. Expected opposition: heavy. Luftwaffe fighter bases at Stendal and Brandenburg were active, flak corridors over the Ruhr. The escort doctrine was clear. Stay with the bombers. Do not chase individual enemy fighters beyond visual range of the bomber stream. Your job is to protect the heavies, not to rack up kills. If you see bandits, engage only if they threaten the bombers. If your wingman has a problem, you stay with him. No exceptions. Bob Hayes copied the key points into his kneeboard card. Rendezvous time, altitudes, radio frequencies, IFF codes, bingo fuel. The minimum fuel required to return to base. For this mission, bingo fuel was 120 gallons. The briefing officer concluded, "Gentlemen, the bombers are counting on us. Stick to your sectors, stay disciplined, bring everyone home." 09:15 hours. Bob's P-51 rolled down the runway at Bodney. The Merlin engine roared. 50 caliber rounds loaded. Drop tanks full. He lifted off and climbed to the east. The weather was marginal. Broken clouds at 8,000 feet. Visibility 5 miles. Not ideal, but flyable. Bob's wingman, Lieutenant Danny O'Brien, formed up on his right wing. 2-ship element, standard escort formation. They climbed through the cloud layer and leveled off at 10,000 feet. Ahead, the bomber stream was assembling, 60 B-17s in staggered formations. The sight was both impressive and sobering. Each bomber carried 10 men, 600 lives depending on the escort fighters. Bob checked his fuel. External tanks reading full, internal tank at capacity. He switched his radio to the bomber frequency. "This is Falcon Leader. We have you in sight. Moving to escort position." "Roger, Falcon Leader. Glad to have you with us." Bob and Danny climbed to 24,000 feet and took position above and behind the bomber stream. The escort box. From here, they could see threats coming and dive to intercept. 1100 hours. The bomber stream crossed into German airspace. Bob scanned the sky. High, low, 6 o'clock, always checking. And then the radio crackled. Bandits, 2 o'clock high, 4+. Bob looked up and to the right, 4 dots in the distance. Messerschmitt Bf 109s, altitude advantage. They were setting up for a diving attack on the bombers. Every instinct told Bob to chase them. Climb, engage, shoot them down. But doctrine said, stay with the bombers, engage only if they commit to an attack. Bob held his position. He watched. The bandits circled. Testing. Looking for a gap in the escort coverage. One of the enemy fighters broke formation and dove toward the bomber stream. Bob reacted instantly. He rolled left, pushed the throttle forward, and dove to intercept. Danny stayed on his wing. The Bf 109 saw them coming and broke off. He climbed back to altitude and rejoined his formation. No shots fired. The bombers were safe. Bob pulled back to escort position, heart pounding, adrenaline high. But disciplined. He hadn't chased. He'd protected the bombers. 11:30 hours. Halfway to the target, Bob checked his fuel. External tanks nearly empty. He toggled the switch to drop them. 2 110-gallon tanks fell away. The P-51 felt lighter, more responsive. And then Danny's voice on the radio. "Falcon Leader, this is Falcon 2. I've got a problem. Oil pressure dropping, temperature rising." Bob looked over at Danny's aircraft, a thin stream of black smoke trailing from the engine cowling. "Not good. What's your status, Falcon 2? "Engine's running rough. I think I took a hit from flak back at the coast. Didn't notice it until now. Can you make it to the target?" "Negative. I need to turn back." Bob faced a decision. Doctrine was clear. If your wingman has a problem, you stay with him. But the bombers were approaching the most dangerous part of the mission. The run into the target. Maximum flak, maximum fighter threat. Every escort was needed. "Roger, Falcon 2. I'm staying with you." We turned back together. Bob and Danny peeled off from the bomber stream and headed west, back toward England. Bob kept his eyes on Danny's aircraft. The smoke was getting worse. Behind them, the bomber stream continued east. Bob glanced back. 60 B-17s, 600 men. He hoped the remaining escorts would be enough. "Falcon Leader, this is Falcon 3. You're breaking off?" "Affirmative. Falcon 3. Falcon 2 has engine damage. We're RTB. Return to base." "Understood. We'll cover your sector." Bob felt the weight of the decision. He was leaving the bombers, but he wasn't leaving his wingman. They descended to 15,000 feet to reduce the strain on Danny's engine. The oil pressure gauge was in the red. The temperature gauge was climbing. Danny's P-51 could fail at any moment. Bob stayed close, scanning for threats. If enemy fighters spotted them, 2 damaged aircraft would be easy targets. The minutes crawled by. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. The English Channel came into view. Almost home. 12:40 hours. Bob and Danny landed at Bodney. Danny's engine seized up on the taxiway. Black smoke poured from the cowling. The ground crew ran over with fire extinguishers. The engine was destroyed. But Danny was alive. Bob climbed out of his cockpit, exhausted. He walked to the debriefing room and filled out his mission report. Mission number 43. Escort to Magdeburg. Broke off at 11:30 hours due to wingman engine failure. No enemy aircraft destroyed. No bombers lost in my sector. Later that afternoon, the bomber stream returned. Bob counted them as they landed. 58 B-17s. 2 didn't make it. Shot down over the target. Bob wondered, would those 2 bombers have made it if he'd stayed? Would his presence have made a difference? He didn't know. He'd never know. That night, the squadron commander called Bob into his office. "Captain Hayes, I read your report. You left the bomber stream to escort your wingman back to base." "Yes, sir." "You followed doctrine. That's exactly what you were supposed to do." "Yes, sir." "Well done, Captain. You made the right call." Let me explain the escort doctrine that Bob followed. In the early years of the strategic bombing campaign, American fighters operated under a different philosophy. Their job was to destroy enemy aircraft, shoot down as many as possible, aggressive, offensive. But this approach had a flaw. Fighters would chase enemy aircraft far from the bomber stream, and while they were gone, other enemy fighters would attack the bombers. Losses were high. In January of 1944, Lieutenant General James Doolittle took command of the 8th Air Force. He changed the doctrine. Fighters were no longer primarily hunters, they were protectors. Their mission: stay with the bombers. Engage enemy fighters only when they threatened the bombers. Do not chase. Do not leave your sector. This was a hard pill to swallow for many fighter pilots. They wanted kills. They wanted glory. But Doolittle was clear. The mission is to get the bombers to the target and back. Everything else is secondary. The new doctrine worked. Bomber losses dropped. More bombers reached their targets. More bombers returned home. And the pilots learned. Discipline wins wars, not individual heroics. Bob Hayes flew 68 combat missions before the war ended. He never became an ace. He never shot down 5 enemy aircraft. His final tally, 3 confirmed kills. But Bob brought his wingmen home. Every single one. When a wingman had engine trouble, Bob stayed. When a wingman was low on fuel, Bob escorted him back. When a wingman was hit by flak, Bob covered him all the way to the coast. After the war, Bob rarely talked about his missions. But in a letter to his family in 1946, he wrote this: "I didn't win any medals, I didn't shoot down many planes, but I kept my wingmen alive, and I helped get the bombers through. That's what mattered." Danny O'Brien, the wingman Bob escorted home on January 15th, survived the war. He went home to Massachusetts, got married, had 3 kids. He lived to be 82 years old. In his final years, Danny told his grandson about that mission, about the engine failure, about Captain Hayes staying with him instead of continuing the escort. Danny's grandson asked, "Did you ever thank him?" Danny smiled. "Every day, kid. Every single day." The P-51 Mustang changed the air war over Europe. Before the Mustang, bomber losses were unsustainable. After the Mustang, the Allies achieved air superiority. The numbers tell the story. In 1943, the 8th Air Force lost over 900 bombers. In 1944, after the Mustang became the primary escort fighter, losses dropped significantly despite an increase in missions flown. Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring said after the war, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost. But the Mustang alone didn't win the air war. The pilots did. The doctrine did." Pilots like Bob Hayes, who followed orders, who stayed with their wingmen, who put the mission above personal glory. The escort fighters didn't just protect bombers. They forced the Luftwaffe into battles it couldn't win. German fighters had to attack the bombers, and when they did, the Mustangs were waiting. The result: the Luftwaffe was ground down. Pilot losses, aircraft losses, fuel shortages. By the spring of 1945, German air resistance had collapsed. The P-51 Mustang was the tool, but the men who flew it were the weapon. Today, The P-51 Mustang is remembered as one of the greatest fighter aircraft in history. Museums around the world display restored Mustangs. Air shows feature them. Historians study them. But the real legacy isn't the aircraft. It's the doctrine. It's the lesson. Stay disciplined. Protect your team. Don't chase glory. Do your job. Bob Hayes passed away in 2008. He was 90 years old. His family donated his flight logs and mission reports to the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Those documents are now part of the permanent collection. One of the logs is from January 15, 1945, the mission to Magdeburg. In the remarks section, Bob wrote one sentence: "Stayed with wingman. Correct decision. Correct decision." 3 words that sum up the entire philosophy of Escort doctrine. 3 words that saved countless lives. The lesson of the P-51 Mustang isn't about speed or firepower or range. It's about duty. It's about loyalty. It's about the choice to stay when every instinct says go. If your family has P-51 mission logs, letters, or photographs, we'd love to hear about them. Leave a comment below. Share a memory. Help us preserve these stories. This completes our 3-part series on hidden voices from World War II. The letter on Omaha Beach, the night convoy that kept Patton moving, and the wingman who came home. Each story, told through the words of the men who were there. Each story, a reminder that wars are won not by headlines, but by small decisions made under pressure. Subscribe to this channel for more episodes based on letters, logs, and first-hand accounts recovered from archives around the world. New episodes every week. Thank you for listening. And thank you to the pilots who flew Escort, the men who stayed with their wingmen, the men who brought the bombers home.